Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Intact session on diversity, equity, and inclusion, creating educational environments for every child. We are so happy that you all were able to take a minute out of your busy schedules to join us today. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items to go over with you. But we would love to learn more about you. So if you don't mind taking a minute and introducing yourself in the chat box with your organization, your role, and where you are calling in from, that would be great. All right. So here's our disclaimer. As a part of our session, we must provide you with this disclaimer. This presentation was prepared by Intact under a cooperative agreement for SAMHSA. While this event is supported by SAMHSA, the contents are those of the authors and do not necessarily represent the official views of SAMHSA, HHS, or the U.S. government. Session security. So, while we hope there are not any security issues in this session today, if some issues were to happen, this session would immediately close out, and you would be notified via email on how to rejoin a new session. This session, we want to say thank you again for attending one of the Intact sessions. Listed here are some of our incredible national partners that we have come together to utilize all of our expertise as subject matter experts to help inform the field by creating products, resources, and sessions like this to enhance the behavioral and mental health fields. I'm Jasmine Boatwright. I am with Youth Move National and one of the folks listed in this team here. Sorry, that's Coco, and sometimes she likes to say hi. All right, so here at the center, our vision is that all children, youth, and families living with and impacted by mental health challenges will have access to the resources and opportunities that they need to thrive in a comprehensive and equitable system of care. We serve a wide sector audience, including everyone from state leaders, providers, to school workforce, infant and early childhood providers. Sorry, one second. Let's got Coco going, but I'm gonna just close this door really quick.
Hi there, and I can hop in and just go through the next few slides here. So, hi everyone, I'm Ashley Singleton. I'm one of the senior project managers. Just to let you all know that we will provide a certificate of completion at the end of this event. We will also provide you all with the presentation slide deck, any resources that our fantastic presenter refers to, and you can receive a recording for this event. We'll have it online, and we'll have it in other places where you can find it on our website. The link is there on the slide. And let's see, what else do we have to share with you all this morning? Well, this afternoon, morning for some, afternoon for others. Welcome to today's session on diversity, equity, and inclusion, creating educational environments for every child. Jasmine, anything else you want to share before we pass it over to Erin?
Nope, that's it. I will go ahead and introduce Erin. So just to let you all know a little bit about Erin Walker. Erin is a special educator with over 20 years of experience within the education. She holds a bachelor's in arts of focus, a bachelor's of arts focused in special education from William Patterson University of New Jersey. She is honored to be one of the 152 individuals nationwide to hold a master's degree in social emotional learning, SEL, from National University. She believes in the power of SEL and views it as the gateway to equity and lowering disproportionate outcomes while concurrently increasing student achievement and school safety. By leveraging and lowering disproportionate outcomes while concurrently increasing students' achievement and safety. By leveraging the transformational power of SEL within the multi-tiered interconnected system framework, we can create equitable, welcoming, and safe learning environments where all staff and students feel valued and have real opportunities to demonstrate their abilities. So without further ado, I will go ahead and pass it over to you, Erin, to get us started.
Thank you, Jasmine, and thank you, Ashley, and thank you everyone for being here today. We're going to get started by inspiring some connections. So on the screen, these are some of my favorite quotes that I find to be true when it comes to the importance of social emotional learning and a multi-tiered system of support, MTSS. So I would like and encourage anyone who may be comfortable, if you have a quote or if there's one on the screen that's resonating with you, if you wanted to possibly share out or put a little note in the chat. One of my favorite ones on here, it's hard because they're all my favorites, but one of my most favorite ones on here is by Mr. Estrada, and that is, if a child can't learn the way we teach, then maybe we should teach the way they learn. So we're going to jump right into what we're here today for. I hope by the end of this, everyone will have an increased understanding of how equity systems in educational environments impacts and is impacted by everyone. Hopefully, everybody's going to walk away with some ways to increase their culturally and linguistically responsive teaching and apply those culturally responsive teaching methods and strategies within your classrooms or your school. So we're going to look at some definitions today. We're going to look at culturally responsive teaching methods and practices in terms of impact culture, harmful cycles, social emotional learning, and equity. We're going to look at some frameworks to develop culturally responsive teaching practices and can support that. We're also going to examine how restorative practices and justice and equity all fit in. And then again, we're really going to look at some strategies in terms of increasing that diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, I'm not sure if everyone was able to receive the guided notes. I believe that Joanne is going to drop that or has dropped the link to the PDF in the chat. By right now, this early in the presentation, we've already engaged into culturally and linguistic responsive strategies to build equity and increase in the sense of inclusion in your classrooms. The first one was the ability to have the inspiring connections. And the guided notes is the second one. The use of guided notes, it promotes equitable access to the grade level material for students, and it supports their SEL development because they're increasing their self-management and responsible decision-making. And those are two of the domains when we think of CASEL 5 framework. So on your guided notes, you should see a table. And just in the next couple minutes, I'd like everyone to just define what diversity, equity, and inclusion means to you. Being consistent with understanding and the use of terminology, it supports increasing equity within any space. The consistency allows for a common understanding amongst all the members in that community at the time. So if you took a moment and you review the definitions for diversity, equity, and inclusion that are on the screen, and then reflect on your own personal definitions. Were they the same, similar, different? And again, if anyone feels comfortable sharing, they're more than welcome to pop it in the chat, or if you have the ability to unmute, you could share out. Okay. Okay. We're going to move along. So when it comes to culture, it's hard to define culture because there is a multitude of definitions because it means different. But ultimately, the concept of culture is very much like an iceberg where there is 9/10 of culture is underneath the surface. Surface culture is what is most easily seen. Okay. It usually carries a lower emotional load for people when we look at more of like simple things like the games a culture will play, the food a culture will eat, the music, celebrations, dances. A great example of surface culture would be participating in a multicultural potluck where everyone would bring a dish that they feel represents their culture. When we move down to shallow culture, this has higher levels of emotional load attached to it, higher levels of emotion. And these have unspoken rules, such as courtesy, personal space, haptics. I'm a haptic person. You can probably see me. I'm trying to be conscious and not move my hands as much. I'm the person who has no problem high-fiving, putting my hand on your shoulder. Eye contact is a big one, and that's shallow culture. Because in America, we often view eye contact as a form of respect. However, for many other cultures, it's seen as the opposite. It's seen as disrespectful. It's seen as defiant and possibly even aggressive. So for some of our children from Mexico, Colombia, and many Asian and African countries, children are raised that eye contact is disrespectful when they're being corrected. So if you think of that, old dialogue, look at me when I'm talking to you, that's the exact opposite of what these students or these children have grown up to know. How could that cultural difference lead to unnecessary conflicts within our school environments? I did this presentation. At the end, the school leader came up to me. He is of Asian descent, and he said this actually happened to him when he came to America to start teaching. He had a group of Caucasian kids in the classroom goofing off. He went to reprimand them and redirect them, and they started staring directly in his eyes, which is not common. And that led to an escalation of the situation because he was saying, "Stop, why are you looking at me? That's so disrespectful." But for the students from America, they were like, "We're supposed to look at you when you're yelling. That's how we show respect." And that created this conflict. So when we think of deep culture, this is where we have intense emotional load and connections. And these are often subconscious. So preferences for competitions, cooperation, the concept of self, problem solving in terms of roles, age, gender, class, occupation. An example is in Chinese society, it is very much about the group, while Americans celebrate the individual and individual achievements. The United States is a meritocracy, right? Where an individual can shine. While in China, any personal success is regarded as a success for the group, the company, the family, the team. So in group work or cooperative working environments, for some of our Chinese students, they're going to consider how their actions in that group affect the group as a whole, rather than just looking out only for themselves. And Edward Hall, he explains that this model teaches us that we can't judge a new culture based on only what we see in front of us. We really have to take the time to get to know the individuals from the culture when we first enter it. And really, only by doing that, we can uncover the values and the beliefs that underlie that behavior for that group. Is there any questions so far? Okay. So this is the blame cycle. there is a paradigm of deficit thinking when it comes to education and educational policies. And for the good of our students and the future of education as a whole, we need to work together to see it and then adjust our mindsets and heart sets accordingly. There's a pattern of wrongful belief that a student's failure is because of the student's lack of ability, a weakness in linguistics, or family dysfunction. And this deficit perspective leads to ill-informed focusing on fixing the kids rather than working to shift our schools and classrooms, cultures, and environments. When we can successfully shift the culture of a school to be identity safe and support intellective capacity, and that's the power our brain uses. It increases our brain's power to process more complex information effectively. And that is when we see students being able to really access and define and reach their full academic potential. When we as adults operate from this deficit thinking paradigm, we believe that culturally and linguistically diverse students don't perform in school because of their own deficiencies, or possibly that their families don't value education, as opposed to believing it's because of societal inequities, unfair school practices, policies, and the differential treatment within curriculums and classrooms, discipline outcomes. And some teachers can allow this belief to influence their instructional decision-making, which often results in giving students less opportunities to develop those higher level thinking skills, which then supports this culturally harmonious way of learning because they don't feel like they can provide these engaging and interesting tasks for their students. So for many years, the school practices have emphasized, as you all know, this lecture and rote memorization, right? It's part of what Martin Haberman would call the pedagogy of poverty, because we set the students up to leave school with outdated skills and very shallow knowledge. They can easily regurgitate facts and concepts, but when it comes to applying them in new situations, they have difficulty. They can't really do that. And that ultimately prevents them from being able to direct their own lives, define success for themselves. We know students need to have this ability to be able to think critically and creatively. And when we operate from the deficit thinking, it just reinforces disproportionality. And that includes the inequitable policies and procedures. Remember, we want to believe that we can fix our schools and our classroom environments and the relationships we have with our students and families. Okay, we want to believe that we can fix the schools to become more culturally and linguistically responsive. On the screen is the blame cycle. And at the top, you see how a teacher's instruction is not working for the student. It's ineffective. Maybe the student is already demonstrating academic skills gaps. Maybe they haven't been exposed to the higher level thinking in the past. Maybe they came back from a worldwide traumatizing event like the pandemic, and online learning didn't meet their needs. So what we see is the students become frustrated. They start to withdraw. They're maybe unappreciative of the teacher's efforts. And what happens from that is the teacher will then increase, like, I'm going to increase my efforts, which unfortunately only increases this mutual feeling of incompetence for the student and the student's perception of the teacher. They start to blame each other. They lower expectations for themselves, for each other, and we start to see self-fulfilling prophecies emerge. Then we see a student, possibly a teacher, withdraw even more, become hostile, possibly. Okay, the student and the teacher can start to develop these stereotypes that reinforce or develop implicit bias. The teacher's instruction is still ineffective, and the cycle just continues, right? Because the student demonstrates these inappropriate behaviors, very often the student is removed from the classroom. And while that student is gone, they lose access to instruction, behavior instruction, SEL instruction, academic instruction. And when they return to class, guess what? They're even more behind now. And that instruction the teacher's giving is ineffective. And this cycle just keeps going and going. And eventually the student is asked to leave school, or the student makes the decision to leave school themselves, and they never reached their potential. They never had the opportunity to experience that success. So then they go out in the world and they have less successful and fulfilling lives. It does send them on a path to what Michelle Alexander would theorize is the school to prison pipeline starts. They do mostly end up in prison if they leave school, or in poverty, or at the very least, our students end up functioning in society with no real quality of life. So what can we do to break this cycle? How can we break the cycle? Well, I believe that implementing a multi-tiered system of supports, a multi-tiered interconnected system framework where it's foundationally rooted in social emotional learning. It addresses behavior through PBIS. There's restorative practices tiered out, and it's trauma-informed care, as well as including a system for students to access school-based or community-based mental health services if needed. And that implementation really allows for this culturally and linguistically responsive teaching to be embedded within all the tiers. And that just encourages and supports our students to become more independent learners, because we're building those relationships and we're promoting them to have these higher level thinking skills. My colleague and I, when we set out to design a MT-ISF framework, or a multi-tiered interconnected systems framework, because this is anytime you have a behavior system, an academic system, and a mental health system, it's actually interconnected. It makes sense because we also have, like I said, restorative practices and trauma-informed practices as well. It is no lie. When Jasmine introduced me, I believe in this and view it as the gateway to equity, lowering disproportionate outcomes. And while those things we want to see lessen, decrease, we see this increase in students' achievement and positive social emotional health and growth. We build these positive relationships. At the same time, we're implementing this fluid continuum of supports within each system of a school. We have it set up so that all the students have access to receive what they need, when they need it, for as long as they may need it. And that helps them become their best selves, not just in school, but in life. This particular framework supports all aspects of a student's development because it's behavior, academic, social, emotional development on what each individual student needs to be successful in school and in life. Because we have the whole child needing to be cared for, their success is then based on the high quality instruction that is possible because of the proactive, positive, affirming, culturally and linguistically responsive, restorative, and trauma-informed environments that we create for them. And it does start with SEL. It starts with social emotional learning. SEL is not one more thing on our plate. It is the plate that carries all the sustenance we need to be able to reach and then teach all of our students. Transformational SEL, as defined by Castle, is the process whereby young people and adults work together to build strong and respectful and lasting relationships where they facilitate co-learning to be able to critically examine the root causes of inequity, and then develop, again, those collaborative solutions that lead to an increase in personal and community and societal well-being. This form of SEL, the transformative SEL, it's aimed at redistributing that power to more fully engage young people and our adults working together towards more just and equitable school and community environments. It emphasizes the development of identity, agency, belonging, curiosity, and this collaborative problem solving, all embedded and connected to the existing Castle 5 framework. So some core features of transformational SEL is this authentic partnering among students and adults. There's this focus on sharing the power, shared decision-making. The academic content really integrates issues of race and class and culture. The instruction honors and makes connections to the students' lived experiences and their identities, and then scaffolds that learning so that they can build an understanding of others' lived experiences. Prioritizing a student's individual and collective agency, it allows them to feel more confident to take action, leading towards more just school and learning and community environments. Because when we can focus on creating and belonging and the engagement of all individuals, we really can see that change is possible. So direct examples within a diverse and equitable and inclusive environment would include print materials in students' home languages, guided notes, visuals to support the content. The students would have a voice. They would have the ability to share their perspectives, setting personal goals, monitoring their progress, bringing in different perspectives from a variety of sources. They develop this ability to see themselves within the world and then their ability to affect that change or to influence change. Everyone, students, adults, would feel very safe and welcomed in this type of environment. You would hear laughter or meaningful conversations of the content from all differing perspectives. So when we think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how it has many constructs that apply directly to the learning environment, Castle designed a framework with 5 core social emotional competencies, and those are self-awareness and self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. So self-awareness is defined as the ability to know one's own emotions, thoughts, and values, and how they might affect our own behavior. Self-management is the ability to recognize and regulate our emotions in a healthy and respectful way that match up to our personal goals and beliefs. Social awareness is the ability to apply empathy and understanding to others' perspectives, values, and cultures. And relationship skills is the ability to form meaningful, supportive, healthy relationships and maintain them. And then also be able to navigate unfamiliar societal settings. And responsible decision-making is the ability to make caring and beneficial personal and social behavior choices, again, in a variety of different social settings. So we had crosswalked the mental health components of Maslow's continuum to the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or CASEL. I apologize for not specifying that sooner. The CASEL 5 SEL framework domains. And then we linked it to viable and basic classroom practices and procedures to address within the learning environment. So with purposeful attention paid to things like physical space and emotional classroom environments, the teaching of social and emotional learning allows the students to achieve and support those environments that we want to see. As teachers, I believe we all know you can't force learning into beings that do not have the capacity to learn because their basic needs are left unmet. We all know that. It holds true for us as adults. If it wasn't words like hangry wouldn't exist, right? So we want to be able to address the social and emotional needs of our students because it benefits learning. In fact, Castle states that satisfying the social and emotional needs of a student, it does more than just prepare them to learn. It actually increases their capacity, their ability for learning at that point. SEL, it matters. Something as simple as becoming aware of when your students might be hungry, when they might come back to the classroom and be a little bit more high energy. The check-ins at the beginning of the day that a lot of teachers are doing, that really allows you to get some feedback on where that student is that morning. And then you can make more informed decisions for that student. If you know that student isn't really prepared to be a more independent learning, you may not want to put them in front of the board to solve a very high complex math problem in front of their peers. That may not lead to a successful interaction for anyone in that space at that time. Because our students need to feel not just physically safe, but emotionally safe as well in our classrooms before they are willing to access and apply those higher level or higher cognitive functioning skills. Having clear expectations, that directly relates to creating more safe environments because it builds trust. Having access to tier 2 services and supports, maybe that is access to be able to have mental health supports at schools. When we have routines lead to predictability. Predictability leads to safety. I know what's happening. I know what's next. I don't need to worry. They can relax that part of their brain and access the part of the brain that they need to develop those higher level thinking skills. So once we develop those, then we can move into the social awareness and relationship skills. Because through developing this sense of purpose, this sense of success, we see that the students build more positive self-esteem. And that allows them to become more independent learners because they're in a classroom where mistakes are okay. Positive affirmation and meaningful interactions allow for them to further their learning. We recognize that individuality through differentiating the learning to meet the needs of all students. So we have these safe learning practices, and that allows for more sustained behavior and educational outcomes. And when we have these self-actualization at the end, the responsible decision-making, that's where we really see the students pushing through and practicing those learning skills so they can shine, they excel, they attain goals, so they will push themselves further and take more risks. Well, I never thought I'd be able to solve an algebraic expression, but I did. So maybe now I am willing to look at the next level up and come into it with a more positive outlook for myself, which just supports the motivation. So when we think of SEL and why it's important for equity, research shows that it has the positive effects for academic behavior, physical health. It improves citizenship. It is demanded by employers. Forbes screened, I think, 100 top companies, and they said it is essential for lifelong success because they know that in this very technological world we live in, we have to be able to connect with people, not just in person, but online as well. So it allows for this reduction of maladjustment, failed relationships, interpersonal violence, and substance abuse. All teachers, I think, know that this job of education is a human one. It is about those relationships. And when we can prioritize relationships and focus on the quality of the connections we're making with our students, we see over and over again that the teachers who have these strong emotional competencies feel more effective and the kids are more engaged, and the kids not only learn more, but they feel like they are more effective. It's not just them doing it. They actually will communicate and say, I feel like I'm a more effective teacher. And that's because of the strength and the relationships they built, that when there is a challenge or there is a concern or there is an event for a student or a student's family, we have this relationship built already. It's interesting to me because the social emotional engagement of students is very critical to that academic progress. It's this essential element that when we're building these equitable school environments. There are 4 social emotional elements that have been found to influence achievement for students. And the first one is attachment to academic content and the school itself. The second is teacher support, how well they felt their teacher was there for them. Third is peer values. And fourth is mental health. And when we foster social emotional engagement, it does require more than just a freestanding lesson. Schools have to and should be able to use data to continuously examine their policies and their procedures. We want to be building those practices that allow students and adults to come together to foster those relationships while aligning our discipline policies so that the students and the family feel cared for, and then they're able to use those communication skills and the interpersonal skills they've been developing in real world situations. These are 4 of the top leaders when it comes to culturally and linguistically appropriate teaching or responsive teaching. And if you read what Gloria and Marjorie and Shiroki and Zaretta say, the common thread is SEL. It's this foundation of culturally responsive teaching. So equity is addressed through culturally responsive teaching methods when you embed and in conjunction with the social emotional learning. Culturally responsive teaching methods allow students to feel and experience acceptance on their road to defining their success and then achieving that success. Historically and currently, we know students from marginalized cultural groups face these disproportionate outcomes when it comes to their achievement, when it comes to discipline or consequences. And because relationship skills are defined as one of the SEL core competencies, according to Castle, in order to really fully meet the needs of every child, a culturally and linguistically responsive classroom really needs to be able to be developed. So bringing together insight from extensive research on culturally relevant and responsive and sustaining pedagogies, New America developed 8 common competencies of a culturally responsive educator. And even though this isn't an exhaustive list, these interconnected competencies illustrate the common skills and knowledge that research and theory in the field suggests is critical when we are enacting culturally responsive teaching with this fidelity across grade levels, across subject areas. And that is when we do see this increase in inclusion and equity within the learning environments. So this is Marjorie, no, I apologize. This is Janet Bennett's framework for cultural competency. So when we think of what intercultural competency is, she describes a heart set, and that's your attitude. That's what you feel and connect to your personal beliefs, your attitudes, your perceptions. Essentially, you have the heart for the work that you're doing. Think, the mindset, that's knowledge. That's what you think and how it contributes to a growth mindset in general to increase positive interactions. A reflective question might be, am I approaching this through an equitable lens, and kind of giving yourself that moment to check yourself. It allows for that analysis. And then the skill set is what we do. This is our ability. This is what we do to work our hardest to ensure our outcomes are equitable. This is where we might start to look at developing the skills necessary to make that happen. What do I need to work on? We see relationship building skills, our empathy, our ability to gather information, such as attending a webinar like this, where we're getting more information, we're working on our skill set, our ability. And how I interpret this is what my personal mantra is: know better, be better, do better, and change the world, right? If I know better, I take it as a personal responsibility to take what I know, that new knowledge, and then use it to adjust myself to be better. And then by doing that, I'm doing better for my students in my classroom. And then the intercultural engagement comes just when all of those things align, when the heart set, the mindset, and the skill set come together to create this inclusive learning environment that all people feel safe and respected in. It's the capacity to appropriately and effectively interact across all cultures. So we have diverse classrooms. We know that we have diverse classrooms, but the ultimate goal is to ensure that these classrooms have this true synergy based on the discourse happening and the learning and celebrating of differences. Okay. This is Marjorie Ginsburg's framework. And this motivational framework, it's built on principles and structures that are meaningful across all cultures. And the main idea is to ensure that your students and your families know that you believe in them and that you're there for them. So when we think of relationships and inclusion, that's the learning experience and how it contributes to the development of the community of learners who then feel respected by and can respect each other, themselves, and you. Of course, it allows for that connectedness. And again, this is where you would see the routines, the procedures that are universal, that everyone uses. They develop that, again, that sense of safety. It's consistent, it's predictable. The next one would be, I apologize, thought that was shut off. The next one is attitude. And this is the learning experience that we provide for our students and how it offers and promotes choice, personal relevance, incorporates their voice. It helps them have this positive attitude. This is where we see teachers working with the students to personalize the relevance of course content. When we think of this, we look at the students' experiences, their concerns, their interests, and that we can use that to supplement our content, and we can address it when we're answering their questions that they're posing. A great way to think about this is that for older students, for example, we help guide them to make real world choices regarding their learning, right? This is how it's relevant to you. I often say, how many of us were told by a math teacher, especially at one point, that you're not going to be able to walk around with a calculator in your pocket? Well, we sure showed them, right? No, but making it more relevant. They told us that wouldn't be an option because no one thought it would be. That was relevant. Why do you need to know math? Why do I need to know how to do this in my head? Because you're not going to be able to walk around with a calculator. So same for our students, how they learn, what they learn, who they learn with. The last time you sat next to your best friend during a group project, you guys didn't really have a lot of success completing the product. Maybe you want to make a better choice for your learning this time, right? The meaning, the rigor. This is where we make sure we're giving our students opportunities to challenge, to be challenged, to access those higher level thinking skills again. Through this rigorous and engaging curriculum activity that allows for these higher order thinking skills, it promotes neuroplasticity within the brain. And that's the brain's ability to actually develop new brain cells, grow new brain cells, create new connections amongst the brain. And as that happens, the students then develop this sophisticated level of thinking, these higher order thinking skills which ultimately does allow for an improved social emotional learning, positive behavior changes, and then, of course, the academic improvements. And then competence and the results is the experience that creates the participants' understanding that they're becoming more effective and authentic in their learning. That the information, the consequence, or the product supports the student's understanding and their individual value of the learning. So the teacher would clearly communicate the purpose, why we're doing this, and then the criteria for excellence, not just to the students, but to the families too. Like, we've all sent home rubrics. That's an example of a culturally and linguistic appropriate teaching practice. I know exactly what I need to do to get that top grade. I know exactly what will happen if I don't. Having a menu of choices for how students can demonstrate their knowledge, another great way to bring in what they value and connect it to their learning to motivate them to give you these results. If you have a student that you know is really big into comic books, allow them to do a book report in a comic book form, recreate the character as a superhero, etc. So just reflect for a second and think what are some things you might be able to do, or a simple activity you can incorporate tomorrow that might start to build this environment you would like to see, and that would support the students. Very quickly, I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with either of these graphics, but on the left is what is the social discipline window. It was developed of the founders of the International Institute of Restorative Practices, even though it was created a very long time ago for some of us. It's still used and still backed this day by IRP. So you'll see these two axes where there's low support to high support, low control to high control. And when you think of the methods, when you have a low support but high control, the educator is usually in this 2 window. It's a punitive environment for our students. And because restorative practices are rooted in social emotional learning, it's all about like the effect of the relationship and how we can build these communities. That's a big foundational component. There's this assumption that everyone in the community is going to be connected somehow, right? We're all connected to one another. So when a harm is done, it's seen again as like, not just like, oh, you hurt my feelings, but you hurt my feelings by knocking my book off my desk, which then hit the desk next to me and affected that student's learning. So it really allows for a more equitable system, because there's this collaborative problem solving again, where the person who has caused the harm is held accountable, but the person who felt harmed, they come to an agreement, and that's focusing on fixing the relationship somehow. I often say that you can't repair or restore something that wasn't built in the first place. So you have to spend time allowing those students to build those relationships with each other and with you, so that when a harm is done, there is something to repair. Okay. The graphic on the right is this invitational teaching model that Perky and Stanley, coming out of the book Building Equity, which is referenced a lot in terms of the strategies and activities that we're about to get to. When I was doing the research surrounding all of this, it was easy for my brain to connect and see that an intentionally uninviting teacher is very similar to a punitive teacher. And we really don't want to create dismissive and alienating environments for our students, right? And then you have unintentionally uninviting, and those are the not, right? This is like what we're not doing. And then unintentional inviting, this makes me think of myself as a first-year teacher. I had no idea what I was doing, but all the kids wanted to hang out with me, and I was like, gosh, I just want to eat my lunch. Why are you here? And then being able to realize and get to the blue window, which is with. And that's when we're very sensitive to our students' needs and we understand them, but we still have high expectations for them. We understand their needs and we build supports to meet their needs so they can still reach that expectation. And here are some great examples of ways that you can build in connection to Marjorie Ginsburg. So you can do think, pair, shares, empathize, let the students share their perspectives. You can give your students a multiple intelligence survey and then allow, that will give you insight into how your students learn, but then you can use that to create your menu of choices, knowing this type of students and how they like to learn. KWL charts, connecting students' prior knowledge to what we know, what we're going to learn, and then what we learned. Again, guided notes, checklists. The self-assessments allow students, again, to self-assess their skills and then set reasonable goals for themselves. Project-based learning. And then when we think of the results or the competence, what we want out, exit slips is a really great way to be able to see what your kids were thinking, where they're feeling, different levels. Like I said, this assessment options, again, data from the multiple intelligence survey, allowing the students to give feedback. And then here's some more. If your school or your district does a climate survey, analyzing and then acting on that data is a really good way to help increase the equity and inclusion in your environments, because especially if it's a student survey and the students are anonymously answering how they really feel about their school or their classroom environments. Another one on here that was one of my favorites to do with the kids was radio reading. But as radios kind of faded out and celebrity musicians and celebrities kind of became more in the forefront, we would do personality reading, where we would have a group of choices, and a student could choose to read the page in this person's voice, read the page sounding like Casey Kasem. And when my kids were like, we don't know who that is, it opened the door to expose them to who Casey Kasem was, what he did, and then also have that connection to me. And that is some, and that is the end. And at this point, I would welcome any questions or comments or any discussion surrounding any of the material I went over.
Hey, Aaron, we did have Linda in the chat box that left a comment a little earlier in the presentation that said, I would argue that including the universal design of learning framework in the MT-ISF chart would have academic and behavioral areas fully inclusive by moving some of them from tier 2 items to tier 1. Currently, decisions can be made that segregate students and exclude students with disabilities and learning with their same age peers.
She is correct. That is part of why we highly encourage schools to look at data and have multiple sources of data when they're making a decision to determine if a student does need a tier 2 or a tier 3 support. And for a long time in education, tier 3 was synonymous with IEP, special education, and that is not the case. You could need to be, let's say if it's a mental health concern or a student in crisis, that student's family may decide that student needs a residence stay or a hospitalization stay. What the school can do for that student coming back is work with the family, the student, the sending institution, and develop a transition plan. What supports are we going to have in place so that the student who needs this very high level tier 3 supports to be successful, what are we going to have in place? And again, it should be created collaboratively. It shouldn't just be the school saying, okay, well, when this kid comes back, this is what we're going to do. Or wait, that kid came back, we don't have a plan in place. The fluidity of the system should allow for students to access what they need when they need it for as long as they need it. There's progress monitoring generally built in to support decision-making when it comes to interventions. When I coach and support schools with developing this, we have database decision rules for each intervention they have the capacity to offer, which does allow for more informed decisions. As a special education teacher, that's where I got started. And that was a big reason why. Once upon a time, teachers could just say, this kid belongs in special ed. And there was no data collection surrounding it. That's really how the response to instruction, the RTI model that a lot of schools use, started, because they weren't making database decisions. And we saw, and still do see, this gross influx of our African-American and now Latinx students being disproportionately referred for special education services.
Thank you so much for that, Erin. And thanks again, Linda, for that comment in the chat box. We only have a couple of minutes left, you guys. So if you missed the beginning of the session, I wanted to just remind you to keep a lookout for the follow-up email that will include the certificate of completion. You will also receive a copy of this presentation and the recording. Thank you all again. And as well, stay connected, right? We have a lot of these types of opportunities moving forward. And so a way to stay connected with INTAC is through our website, intactmentalhealth.org. You can access things like upcoming events, archived recordings, request support. You can get publications and resources that you need. And you can also sign up for our newsletter. You can follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of that good stuff. Most important at the end of this thing here, my most important slide, is that we need to keep hearing from you all in order to continue to bring some of these types of sessions to you. It's important for our quality control and to the future of our funding for projects like these. We are able to offer these types of products at no cost by hearing your guys' feedback and allowing us to continuously improve our services and provide information and resources that you all need for the field. We ask that you take just a few minutes to tell us your thoughts. And you have 3 ways to access the survey today. The first way is that the link will be put in the chat box. The second way is that the survey will actually automatically pop up on your screen as soon as you exit this training. And then the third way is that the survey will also be sent in the follow-up email. Again, if you could just take a few minutes to complete that survey and get it back to us, that would be great. Again, we want to thank you all for joining us today. And thank Erin, our lovely presenter, for all of the great information that you were able to share today. I definitely jotted down a few gems myself. And yeah, till next time, you guys. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.